Hello, so welcome to another week as we're continuing on this journey through Exodus. This week we're looking at Exodus chapter 4, verses 18 to 23. So it's just a short segment today. So let me read this to you. So this is Exodus chapter 4, verses 18 to 23. Then Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Let me return to my own people in Egypt to see if any of them are still alive." And Jethro said, "Go, and I wish you well." Now the Lord had said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all those who wanted to kill you are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons, he put them on a donkey, and started back to Egypt, and he took the staff of God in his hand. The Lord said to Moses, "When you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have given you the power to do, but I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go. Then say to Pharaoh, 'This is what the Lord says, Israel is my firstborn son, and I told you, let my son go, so he may worship me. But you refuse to let him go, so I will kill your firstborn son.'" Just a short segment there, as Moses sets out on this journey from the wilderness back to Egypt. So with staff in hand, Moses goes from the burning bush to Jethro, his wife's father. In the wilderness, don't forget, Moses gained a family. Not all wilderness experiences are bad and alone and fraught with desperation and loneliness. Yes, Moses had fled to the wilderness, but in the wilderness he found a certain level of healing and he found love. He gained a wife and he gained a family, Zipporah and his father-in-law Jethro. It's all well and good saying yes to God to go back to the place that wanted you dead, but Moses wouldn't be going back to that place alone. He would have to take his family and loved ones to a place that wouldn't be safe for them. Why? Because God told them to. Interestingly, Moses doesn't bring up his family when he is arguing with God about whether he should go or not. He only brought up, like before God, his own perceived frailties, not the needs of his family. Did Moses already know the strength of Zipporah? Probably. I mean, Zipporah is an incredibly strong character, and please, if you get the time, read more about her. She's an incredibly strong character person in Moses' life. But Moses still had to have the conversation with his father-in-law Jethro about what they were about to do, who had taken Moses in. Now, in my head, this would not have been an easy conversation to walk towards. To tell the man you took in that you need to leave and you're going to take his daughter to go to the place that you escaped from, to the place that wants you dead. And why? Because God showed up in a burning bush and told you to go and save his people. Wow. That's a conversation I would like to see, but it's not a conversation I would like to have. Interestingly, according to verse 18, Moses doesn't actually give Jethro the whole story. He simply says that he needs to go to see if any of his people are alive. Did Moses chicken out, or are we told not all the details? I honestly don't know. This is all we have. But we do know that Moses gets Jethro's blessing to leave with his family. Such freedom and trust demonstrated there by Jethro. I'm sure Moses would have been relieved at how well that conversation went, and it was right that Moses had that conversation with Jethro. Is God asking you to do something? Will whatever God is asking you to do, will it impact other people? And if so, how? Are there people that you need to speak to before heading out into whatever God is calling you into? It's really easy to get caught up in the moment when God is asking you to do something and to just go and do it because God's asking you to do it. This is commendable, but remember, Jesus says there's two greatest commandments. The first one is to love God with everything you have, but the second one is to love your neighbor as yourself. And what Moses is doing here is he's living out those things. Before he steps out showing God is loving him and trusting him with everything, he sees that this decision will impact Jethro. And he sees that He needs to not just disappear from Jethro's life, but he needs to love Jethro and treat Jethro with respect. So he loves Jethro and includes Jethro in the conversation. Sometimes there is fallout when we step out for God, because we haven't actually slowed down to look around to see how might our actions impact other people. If only we'd slowed down and looked before stepping, we might have been able to have conversations that could have helped pave the way and saved any hurt or trauma by what we're doing, by having well-timed and well-placed conversations with the people around us who we love, showing them love as well as God love. Is there anybody you need to talk to today, just like Moses talked to Jethro? And then we get verses 19 and 20, and I think they're quite interesting. Now that Moses has made the decision to go and take the family, God then reassures Moses that all the people that actually wanted Moses dead have died themselves, that Moses is in the clear. It's interesting that we only get this detail excuse me, after Moses had made the decision. Maybe this information would have been helpful before, but again, not only is God's timing perfect, but we don't need all the details before we step out. Sometimes we need to step out in order for God to reveal more details to us. The second interesting thing, before these verses that we're looking at today, Moses' staff was always referred to as the staff of Moses, or Moses' staff. But now in verse 20, we see something different. It's now called the staff of God. When we lay something down for God and we say, God, use this, whether it's our car, whether it's our finances, whether it's stuff that we have, whether it's our gifts or our abilities, and we lay that down and we say, God, use this, and then God gives it back to us for us to use it for his kingdom and glory, it's always good to remember that we no longer own it. It's God's. We laid it down, we gave it to God. God puts it back in our hand, but he is still the owner of it. Actually, we are now just stewards of something that belongs to God, because we've already laid it down. It's God's. What have you offered to God in your life previously? If God has given that back to you, remember, you might still have it, but you don't own it. You're a steward of it. It's actually God's. How do you see your stuff? And now we see, once this happens in verse 19 and 20, God starts to fill in more of the blanks for Moses. He reveals that miracles will be performed. He reveals that God will harden Pharaoh's heart. And God even reveals the ending act that will set Israel free, the death of Pharaoh's firstborn. Now Moses is on the journey. And it's only on the journey that God really starts to prepare Moses for what he's about to face. It's not the whole picture, but Moses is given more of it. The preparation of Moses has begun. But this preparation didn't start before he decided to step out, but after. Now he's on the journey, then the preparation happens. God might not have you totally ready for what he's calling you to, but he will prepare you on the way. But sometimes we have to make the first step out. Will we?